Some words don't need to scream in order to wound. They arrive softly, like velvet on the ear, but inside them is a blade sharp enough to cut through trust, dignity, and peace of mind. Words can be the most lethal weapons in love, precisely because they never look like weapons. They slip into your days disguised as tenderness, but they are masks worn by betrayal already in progress. And when you fail to recognize them, you don't just risk heartbreak, you risk becoming a willing accomplice in your own destruction. Because when a woman decides to lie, she doesn't need to raise her voice, pack a bag, or vanish into the night. All she needs is to arrange her sentences carefully, to let the right phrases drip from her lips at the right moment, and to rely on you staying asleep in the dream of her loyalty. What makes this betrayal so twisted is that it isn't noisy. It isn't obvious. It happens quietly while you're distracted by affection. While you're trusting her softness, she is exercising her freedom. While you're reassured by her gentle gestures, she's already crossing thresholds inside herself that no longer include you. And this is the trap most men fall into. Not the betrayal itself, but the blindness, the desperate need to keep believing that what looks harmless must be harmless. That's why today I'm not here to comfort you. I'm not here to give you a sugar-coated story about communication or misunderstandings. I'm here to rip the veil off the words you've been swallowing whole. In this conversation, I will reveal 9 phrases, 9 verbal codes, 9 subtle behaviors that women use when they're no longer truly choosing you but still need you around, as an emotional crutch, as financial security, as a safe place to land while their desire lives elsewhere. And the last one, the 9th, is the most dangerous of all because it disguises itself as love itself. Most men, blinded by longing, still mistake it for affection, when in truth it's the clearest declaration that they've already been replaced. Before we begin, I want you to pause and ask yourself something. Have you ever been lied to by someone who looked you straight in the eye, and in that very moment you felt the truth vibrating inside you, but you pushed it away? Not because you were naive, not because you were stupid, but because you loved them, because you wanted to protect the life you'd built, because you were terrified of what it would mean to accept what your body already knew. That right there is the most silent form of betrayal a man can suffer. Not the betrayal that shouts, but the one dressed up as normality. And if you don't learn to hear what's hiding behind certain words, if you don't train yourself to read the silence between the sentences, you will end up a man domesticated by sweet phrases, while reality devours you from the inside. So let's begin with the first of these phrases. And it's one of the most common, the most overlooked, and ironically, the most dangerous. You've probably heard it before. It goes like this. Why are you acting so weird? At first glance, it looks like concern. It sounds like a woman paying attention, reaching out to check on you. But it isn't. That question isn't about you. It's about her. It's not curiosity. It's discomfort. It's not tenderness. It's fear. Fear that without even knowing it, you've started to pierce the veil of her deception. Because the body never lies and the soul speaks louder than words. Without saying a thing, your behavior began to shift. You stopped touching her with the same hunger. You stopped asking with the same urgency. You fell quieter, more withdrawn, more observant. And for a woman carrying secrets, that quietness is unbearable. She can live with your trust, but not with your suspicion. She needs you to stay the same. The devoted one, the blind one, the one who never questions. So when she throws out, "Why are you acting so weird?" It's not because she cares about your mood. It's because she senses her mask slipping. It's because she needs to pull you back into the role you used to play, the role of the man who apologizes for doubting, who feels guilty for seeing too much. And if you don't recognize the maneuver, you'll end up explaining yourself, bending over backwards to justify feelings that were actually warnings from your own intuition. I've seen it countless times in the men I work with. They arrive shattered, asking themselves where they went wrong, and when we trace the story back, there is always that same moment, that same line, whispered like a hook. Why are you acting so weird? Understand this. When she asks you that, it isn't a question. It's a warning. It's a subtle alarm bell telling you she's already noticed your awareness, and she doesn't like it. Because awareness in you means a loss of control for her. And if you, instead of trusting that awareness, decide to explain it away, you step right back into the submissive version of yourself, the version that loses respect, that loses desire, that loses dignity, the version that chooses blindness over instinct. So the next time you hear that phrase, don't explain, don't justify, don't smooth it over. Embrace your so-called weirdness, because what's truly strange isn't your suspicion. What's strange is that you tolerated so much for so long without calling it for what it was. And here's the paradox. The moment she begins to feel uneasy about your shift is the moment you're closest to breaking free. Because your weirdness is nothing but the birth of clarity. If she's unsettled, it's not because she loves you more. It's because she realizes she can no longer control you the way she used to. That, right there, is the first tremor in the emotional foundation of someone hiding something. But the story doesn't end there. Because once she senses your suspicion, she won't simply retreat. She'll escalate. She'll reach for another phrase, one polished to sound noble, almost sacred, yet poisoned at the core. And that brings us to the second phrase, which men hear all the time and almost always swallow without reflection. You have no reason to doubt me. Let me be blunt. When those words leave her mouth, she's not offering reassurance. She's demanding obedience. She's not extending you peace of mind. She's commanding you to ignore your own. This phrase is a subtle but deadly reversal. Because instead of her proving loyalty through action, the burden now falls on you. You must justify your doubts while she floats above suspicion, untouchable. She has flipped the entire frame. She no longer needs to show innocence. You must prove guilt. And in that moment, your strength collapses inward. Because instead of trusting your radar, you begin to mistrust yourself. That's how it happens. One sentence, and you begin whispering in your own mind, am I being unfair? Am I imagining things? Am I too jealous? And from there, the descent begins. Men who ignore their instincts because of this line pay the highest price. I've sat across from them in countless sessions. Men who swallowed that phrase with guilt. Men who silenced themselves for months, even years, until the truth finally bled out in undeniable evidence, messages, photos, confessions, another man's presence in the shadows of their life. And by then, it wasn't just their partner who betrayed them. They had already betrayed themselves by refusing to trust their own soul. Understand this clearly. Trust is not a blindfold. Trust is not closing your eyes and handing over your power just because someone speaks gently. Real trust is built on actions, on consistency, on presence. A mature man doesn't lean on words. He watches the silences between them, the pauses in the rhythm, the shifts in energy, and when his soul, uncluttered by fear, tells him something is wrong, he doesn't silence that voice. He honors it. Because your instinct is not paranoia, it's intelligence in its rawest form. So the next time you hear, you have no reason to doubt me, remember this. If she truly had nothing to hide, she would show it through clarity, through action, through openness. She wouldn't need to weaponize nobility. A woman who insists you have no reason to doubt her is rarely protecting her honor. She's protecting her alibi. And once again, if you ignore that truth, if you step into the frame she built, you don't just risk losing her, you risk losing yourself. Because what you accept silently, what you allow without resistance, becomes the pattern that defines your life. And if you're honest, you'll admit that's already happened to you more than once. Now, as dangerous as this second phrase is, there's one that cuts even deeper. one that plays not on your suspicion, but on your ego. And that brings us to the third phrase, one of the most seductive of all. I'm not like other women. This line has toppled countless men because it hits where you're weakest. Your hunger to believe you've found someone different, someone rare, someone who validates your secret desire to be the one man who sees what no one else ever has. When you hear that phrase, your defenses drop. You open wider. You forgive faster. You justify more. You start believing you're in possession of something unique, a treasure above comparison. But here's the twisted reality. That line almost never shows up when everything is smooth. It appears precisely when doubt has already begun, when the air is heavier, when something feels off, when shadows creep in. That's when she throws it out like a spell, designed to wipe away your hesitation. And here's where you need to become dangerous. Not to her, but to your own illusions. When you hear, "I'm not like other women," resist the urge to compliment. Don't melt. Don't respond with adoration. Don't even smile. Stop. Watch. Let silence be your answer. Because a woman who is truly different doesn't need to declare it. She proves it in her actions. She doesn't claim to be unique. She embodies it. I've seen too many men waste years worshiping that line, clinging to the idea that they'd found someone extraordinary, only to discover the reality later. Like the man who sat across from me, swearing his partner was unlike any he'd ever known. She told him that constantly, and while she was declaring her uniqueness, she was also maintaining a blurry friendship with an ex. "We just talk," she said. "Don't worry, I'm not like the others." He silenced his own discomfort, swallowed it whole, until one day the messages told the truth. No explicit admissions, no outright betrayal, but the tone was undeniable. Desire, flirting, seduction woven between every line. And then he saw the truth. Yes, she was different, just not in the way he wanted. Different in the sophistication of her lie. So when that phrase comes, understand it as a performance, not a revelation. Don't answer with praise. Answer with stillness. Because a man who doesn't fall for words, who doesn't move until actions align, is a man who cannot be controlled. And that, above all, is what you must become if you want to stop living as prey to these soft-spoken weapons. There is a reason the most destructive manipulations are rarely shouted. They are whispered, draped in the ordinary cadence of everyday speech. And this is what makes them so disorienting. You hear the words and nothing in their sound announces danger, yet something in your body recoils. You brush it off because what man wants to believe that love itself could be a disguise? But it is exactly at this threshold, when words begin to feel strangely heavy, despite their innocent surface, that you must train yourself to stand still and listen deeper. Because once the language of deflection and minimization enters the space, you are no longer conversing with intimacy. You are conversing with performance. And nothing illustrates this more clearly than the fourth phrase in this sequence of poisons. You're overreacting. This line is lethal because it strikes not at your suspicion, but at your sanity. It tells you that what you feel isn't real, that your emotional intelligence is flawed, that your perception of reality is too dramatic to be trusted. Think about the cruelty embedded here. A man notices a shift in tone, a change in behavior, a message on her phone that doesn't sit right, or a hesitation in her story that rings false. He doesn't explode, he doesn't accuse, he simply asks, and instead of clarity, he receives this verdict: you're overreacting. At that moment, the issue is no longer her loyalty, it becomes your stability. She has inverted the frame so completely that you, the man who noticed something wrong, become the problem. You are now not only doubting her, you are doubting yourself. I have sat across from men broken by this exact phrase. They describe months of hearing it, sometimes years. Every time they noticed something that didn't align, every time their instincts whispered that a puzzle piece was missing, they were met not with an explanation but with this dismissal. And little by little, they began to mistrust their own perception. They began to believe that maybe they were unstable, maybe they were too jealous, maybe they were wired incorrectly. And that self-doubt was exactly the outcome she wanted. Because a man who mistrusts himself will never hold her accountable. He will apologize instead. He will shrink. He will swallow his questions like poison pills and pretend they never burned his throat. You must understand, reality is not decided by the words of another. Reality is decided by the alignment of what you see, hear, and feel. If your soul whispers to you that something is wrong, it is not an overreaction. It is an alert system honed by millions of years of survival, and to ignore it is to collude in your own downfall. The man who begins to accept you're overreacting as truth is the man who begins to accept gaslighting as love. And when gaslighting becomes love, respect dies. Desire dies. The relationship becomes a slow funeral that you attend every day in silence, dressed in the clothes of devotion but carrying the body of your own self-respect on your back. And when dismissal no longer suffices, when she senses that you may still find your voice, she escalates again. That is when the fifth phrase arrives, and it comes not as attack, but as withdrawal. I need space. Now, let's be clear. In a healthy relationship, the need for space is natural. Two people are not meant to be welded together, suffocating one another with constant presence. But context is everything. When I need space is spoken not as an honest boundary but as a shield against accountability, it is not space she needs. It is distance from being exposed. Watch how it happens. You ask a question that pierces too close to the truth. You express a boundary, a request for clarity, a concern that matters deeply to you. She does not answer. She does not sit with you in discomfort. Instead, she retreats into this noble-sounding phrase, I just need space. It is brilliant in its cunning because it frames you as suffocating. It frames her as the victim of your intensity, and it buys her the one thing she craves most, time. Time to maneuver. Time to continue whatever duplicity she doesn't want you to see. Time to craft a story that will make sense later. I remember one man who told me how his girlfriend used this exact tactic every time he came close to discovering her other relationship. She would vanish for days under the banner of needing space. He, desperate not to appear controlling, desperate to be the good man who respected her independence, always complied. And every time he did, she slipped deeper into the arms of another man. By the time he discovered the truth, it wasn't just the betrayal that crushed him. It was the realization that he had become her accomplice in it, that his fear of losing her made him surrender every opportunity to confront what was right in front of him. Do not misunderstand me. Space in itself is not the enemy, but space used as a weapon is. And the only way to distinguish the two is to look not at the words, but at the patterns. Does her request for space come after authentic closeness, or does it always arrive the moment she is held accountable? Does it expand your connection when she returns, or does it always feel like a reset button that erases your concerns without ever addressing them? If the latter, then you are not giving her space. You are giving her freedom from responsibility, and she is training you to reward her avoidance with silence. And when avoidance alone is not enough, when the questions grow sharper, when your intuition grows louder, she reaches for perhaps the most common and insidious phrase of all, he's just a friend. Now, if there is one sentence that has destroyed more trust than any other, it is this one, because it weaponizes one of the most noble instincts a man can have, the desire not to control, not to smother, not to cage the woman he loves. When she says, he's just a friend, She is not simply describing a relationship. She is crafting a moral high ground where any suspicion you express becomes a sign of insecurity, of immaturity, of being the kind of man who cannot handle his partner's independence. But let us be brutally honest here. In most cases where this phrase arises, you already know the truth. You have already seen the lingering glances, the secretive smiles, the way her phone lights up with his name at hours that don't make sense. You have already felt the shift in her energy, the way her attention drifts when he enters the room, the way her laughter takes on a different texture when she speaks to him. You are not blind and you are not paranoid. You are witnessing the beginnings of emotional infidelity, if not more. Yet because you fear being labeled insecure, you silence yourself. You accept he's just a friend as the end of the discussion, when, in truth, it should be the beginning. I recall a man who told me how he met his wife's friend at a gathering. Everything in his body screamed at him that this man was not just a friend. The eye contact was too charged, the body language too familiar, the energy too alive. When he raised it with his wife, she laughed it off, touched his arm, and said the phrase with such practiced ease, "Don't be ridiculous, he's just a friend." And because he didn't want to be the jealous husband, because he wanted to be the evolved man, he swallowed his instinct. Years later, during the divorce, he discovered that the so-called friend had been her lover all along. And the pain that crushed him was not simply the betrayal of her body. It was the betrayal of his own soul, the realization that he had silenced the very voice that tried to protect him. Men, hear me when I say this. The moment "he's just a friend" enters the conversation, you must not silence your awareness. This does not mean you must explode in accusation. It does not mean you must attempt control. What it means is that you must remain rooted in what you feel. You must refuse to be shamed into blindness. Because a man who refuses to see what is before him is a man already defeated, no matter how much love he thinks he has. And so the pattern continues. Dismissal, withdrawal, deflection. Each phrase is a layer of armor, designed not to protect love, but to protect the distance growing between you. Each one is meant to erode your confidence, to train you into doubting yourself so thoroughly that by the time the truth finally reveals itself, you no longer even recognize the man staring back at you in the mirror. This is why you must learn to hear not just the words, but the architecture beneath them. You must ask not, "What did she say?" but "What role does this phrase play in the larger pattern of evasion?" Because once you see the pattern, the spell is broken. And once the spell is broken, you cannot be controlled. There comes a point in every unraveling where the disguises no longer fit, where the little rehearsed phrases can no longer hold back the storm that is brewing beneath the surface. It is here, in this final act of erosion, that you will hear the most devastating words of all, the ones that do not simply chip away at your trust, but tear at the foundation of your very worth as a man. And it begins subtly, almost tenderly, with the line, "I love you, but I'm not in love with you." At first it sounds gentle, almost merciful. She is not screaming, not blaming, not raging. She is speaking with the calm of someone who has rehearsed her exit in silence for months. But understand this, that sentence is not a revelation. It is a confession that her desire has already died, that her respect has already left, and that she has been living two lives, the one she performs with you and the one she secretly nourishes elsewhere. This phrase is a dagger wrapped in silk. It keeps you bound by offering the illusion of care. I love you, while simultaneously denying you the intimacy and passion that give that love meaning, but I'm not in love with you. It tells you that you are good enough to be pitied, but not good enough to be desired. And if you accept it, you will find yourself in a kind of purgatory, living with someone who treats you more like a brother, a roommate, or a provider than a lover. You will share a bed, perhaps even a family, but the flame that once burned between you will be extinguished, and you will be left trying to warm yourself on the ashes. And what happens when you try to reignite that flame? When you suggest counseling, dates, passion, or reconnection? That is when the next phrase appears. It's not you, it's me. On the surface, this sounds like accountability. She is claiming the blame, saying she is the broken one, the confused one, the lost one. But look closer. This phrase is not true accountability. It is absolution without responsibility. It allows her to exit without being confronted, to declare herself the problem in a way that still makes you question yourself. Because if it really is her, why do you feel like the one who has failed? Why do you carry the shame, the anger, the hollow emptiness in your chest? The reason is simple. Because it's not you, it's me, is not spoken to free you. It is spoken to silence you. It is spoken to close the conversation before you can demand truth. I once spoke with a man who told me his wife had said this to him after 12 years of marriage. "It's not you, it's me," she said. And then she walked away into the arms of the man she had been seeing for over a year. The cruelty of that sentence was not just in the betrayal. It was in the way it left him with no target for his grief. He could not even rage properly because she had claimed the fault but offered no specifics, no real reasons, no closure. He was left not only abandoned but haunted by the uncertainty of whether he had been enough, of whether his instincts had been wrong, of whether the very fabric of his masculinity had been defective. That is the legacy of "it's not you, it's me." It hands you a ghost to wrestle with, and ghosts cannot be defeated. But perhaps the most vicious phrase of all, the one that reduces everything to rubble, is the cold and final, "I don't respect you anymore." Few men ever hear it directly, because most women will not speak it aloud. They will act it instead. They will roll their eyes at you in front of friends. They will dismiss your opinions in public. They will deny you intimacy, mock your ambitions, treat you as though your presence is a burden rather than a gift. But whether it is spoken or acted, the message is the same. The bond is dead. Because love can survive many things, but respect is its oxygen. Once respect is gone, no amount of affection, no amount of nostalgia, no amount of pleading or sacrifice can resurrect the relationship. Men underestimate how much of attraction is rooted not in looks, not in status, not in money, but in respect. A woman may enjoy what you provide. She may even cling to the stability you represent. But if she does not respect you, every gesture of devotion will feel to her like weakness. And when she no longer respects you, she does not see your love as strength. She sees it as desperation. That is why so many men who double down, who beg, who chase, who plead when these phrases appear, find themselves only more despised. They think they are fighting for love, but in truth, they are only proving her right in her contempt. So what is a man to do when these phrases begin to surface? The instinct is to fight, to negotiate, to argue against them with logic, with evidence, with history. But here is the brutal truth. Once these words have become the dominant language of your relationship, you are not negotiating with a partner. You are negotiating with someone who has already left the battlefield. The phrases are not attempts at communication. They are exit strategies. They are not doors opening to reconciliation. They are doors closing to shut you out of a life she has already chosen beyond you. The answer is not to chase, not to plead, not to accept the scraps of half-love offered in these sentences. The answer is to reclaim yourself, to hear these phrases not as puzzles you must solve, but as alarms that tell you it is time to walk away with your dignity intact. Because every second you spend trying to decode them is a second you lose from the life you could be building beyond them. Every ounce of energy you pour into saving something that is already dead is energy stolen from the man you are meant to become. And make no mistake, walking away is not weakness. It is the ultimate assertion of strength. It is saying, I see the game, I hear the performance, I recognize the manipulation, and I will not participate. It is refusing to allow your identity to be defined by the acceptance or rejection of someone who has already shown you that her words cannot be trusted. It is choosing to grieve honestly rather than to live dishonestly. And in that grief, you will rediscover something far more valuable than her approval. You will rediscover your own clarity. Because here is the hidden gift buried in this painful education. Once you have seen these phrases for what they are, once you have endured their sting and survived, you become untouchable. You no longer mistake deflection for intimacy. You no longer confuse pity for love. You no longer silence your instincts to protect someone else's lies. You learn to trust yourself again, to stand in the authority of your own perception, to recognize that your boundaries are not demands. They are the conditions under which love can breathe. The men who refuse to learn these lessons are doomed to repeat them. They will move from relationship to relationship, hearing the same phrases in different voices, living the same collapse in different houses. But the man who learns, who decides that these phrases are not commands to obey, but warnings to heed, will never again be disarmed. He will walk into new connections with his eyes open, not with paranoia, but with discernment. He will offer love freely, but never at the cost of his own respect. He will recognize that the only bond worth keeping is the one where both partners speak the language of truth, not the rehearsed dialect of escape. So when you hear them, you're overreacting, I need space. He's just a friend. I love you, but I'm not in love with you. It's not you, it's me. I don't respect you anymore. Do not ignore them. Do not explain them away. Do not shrink yourself to make them seem smaller. Hear them as they truly are, the final chords of a song that has already ended. And then, with the dignity of a man who knows his worth, step away from the stage. Because the performance is over, and the next act of your life is waiting to begin, not with half love, not with counterfeit respect, but with the uncompromised truth that you are enough, and that you always were.